Thank you, Nadia. Thank you everyone for coming. I know, as Nadia said, it is a very big day for different reasons besides this this webinar. So I appreciate everyone's attention and, focus on something natural that is actually near and dear to my heart. All of us naturalists and educators at Teatown have a few things that we kind of gravitate towards. And mine particularly are birds and wildflowers. So maybe in the spring we'll do some wildflower visiting as a possible topic. But we'll talk about birds. I do have kind of an interactive part in the middle, so we might do some unmuting then if you want to participate, or if you just want to kind of sit back and watch, you could do that too. So birds of winter, the best time to actually observe birds and start to learn about them is actually in the winter. And why is that? Well, one, things kind of slow down in our everyday life. It tends to get a little bit more relaxed, and you're home a little bit more sometimes, maybe not out as much. But there are also less birds in our area in the winter, so you don't have to learn as many. So you can kind of gear up as we go into spring, learning a little bit more and more, so that maybe when spring comes and all the migrants come back, then you can really start, testing yourself and the skills that we're going to touch upon today. So I'm going to share a screen with a PowerPoint that I made, and we'll get that going. Okay. Okay. All right. So birds of winter. And why do we watch them? As I said, it's an easier time to start to get to know them, your feathered neighbors. And why spend some time with them? They're beautiful. They're actually very enjoyable to watch. If you sit and watch them for a little bit, it could be funny. It could be, like I said, very beautiful. You can also learn a lot from their behavior, and just individuals. You start to get to know, not that they have like personalities per se, but they kind of have like little things that they do that are a little different depending on the species, or some individuals that you might see around more and more, especially if you have bird feeders and you're feeding them. What species are here at any given time. You can learn kind of what's going on. Like certain species will migrate from a higher or a more northern climate to our area in the wintertime. So if it's a colder, one of those like snowy vortex type winters, we might see certain species that we might not see on a more milder winter like what we've been having right now. And something else about watching birds that is pretty cool is that you can participate in citizen science, and we'll go into depth a little bit more a little later on. So you're kind of helping nature by just maybe sitting in your PJs and watching your feeder for like 15 minutes. So it's all pretty cool. And here we go. All right. So something that I like to get into is, the do's and don'ts of birding. So first of all, you want to enjoy yourself. Anything that you learn and want to push yourself in is that you have to have fun with it and enjoy it. It's very important that's like the biggest thing. If you don't like it, it's kind of like work, and the poor point of work, something that you don't you're not going to get enjoyment from. Have something on hand like a guidebook or a phone app. There's so many things out there right now. I have certain books that I like, certain ones that will take on the trail, certain ones I like just to have at home. And now that you have your little device, You can bring that anywhere, and there are many different options for apps with that. So it's a good time to start birding. Also, go with a friend or a small group. Many organizations do have bird hikes and groups that go out, and that's one of the best ways to learn about birds, because you're active, you're out there, versus just sometimes sitting at home watching a feeder. That's a great exposure, but sometimes if you're with other people, they'll be able to point out other things because they might be a little further along in their learning or have more experience, that they can kind of point out certain things that we might not have time to do, or because we're not outside, you might not be able to see that right now. So I know with the current situation going on right now, it's hard to get together with other people, but if there are people that you feel comfortable with being outside, you can wear a mask and spread out. The one thing I do warn about, when it's a little cold out, and you have the mask and you put the binoculars up, they will fog, so you kind of have to work around that situation. So think about that beforehand, instead of like out there trying to like allow yourself to see. So couple things to not do when you're forging this path is, don't push yourself to learn everything. I have done this for many, many years, and I'm still learning like every day. So there is so much to learn. So just pace yourself to keep that enjoyment, because otherwise, if you get too frazzled, then you're not enjoying it anymore, and you're not gonna like birds anymore. Just kidding, you won't, you still, but you won't have that passion for it as much. So take your time, enjoy, let it unravel as it will for yourself. And one nice thing about birding is you really don't have to purchase anything unless you really want to. If you want to buy a feeder and set that up, you could do that. Some people have like 5 feeders, and they each have different types of seeds and to attract different types of birds. And some people have generalist ones where there's just a bunch of different seeds in one feeder, and that's great. And also binoculars and eyepieces like that. You don't necessarily need to get a $2,000 spotting scope. You can find a good pair of binoculars for a decent price. It's pretty amazing how technology works nowadays, and how they can create really good products for fairly reasonable price. So if you're looking at birds at a feeder and you want a closer look, having like a smaller pair is just perfect. If you're out on the trail and you want to do more birding and you're looking at farther distances, then going up in scale is it's a good treat for yourself. So you don't have to go crazy purchase wise, but just get what you need for now, and then you can always upgrade later on. Okay, and welcome to everybody who's joined us so far. All right, so a couple of things when you're looking and starting to begin identifying birds, you want to look at certain patterns. And one thing that humans are really great at are picking up patterns. And we don't always think about it, but you start observing something like, say, there's a car that you find that you really like. And once you learn about that car, you start seeing it popping up on the road in different places. Like, oh, there's that car, there's that car, there's that car. Just like if you start learning about invasive species, and you learn about a certain plant that is an invasive species that, we're trying to, maybe keep at a minimal number around Teatown or your town, and all of a sudden you learn about it, and then all of a sudden you're seeing it everywhere. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. So we're really good at this. We just have to practice. So a couple of things that you want to start off with is, kind of the biggest thing is the body of the bird, and looking at the color or patterning that it might have. is usually a good indication, like this little guy here, the eastern bluebird. It's got its biggest color in its name, and it's the biggest thing that you'll notice about it. You can also look at the beak and feet, because they'll actually tell you a lot about that bird and what it's where you might find it, what it's doing, what it's looking for. Also the body shape and the posture. Each bird is kind of like people. They have certain ways and habits that they present themselves. Flight patterns, how they fly. If you're out on the trail, or even if you're at your house watching the birds come in and out of the feeder, you can see certain patterns as they move in. And where are they looking for food? What behavior are they exhibiting? Because they that will tell you something about that bird as well. All right, so the coloration and patterns, or the main thing that you see with that bird is, like what color is that pops out at you. Like with the bluebird, what did you notice first? You notice the blue. You also start to narrow your focus. You kind of want to start with birds, you start wide and you narrow it down. Okay, so you start with the main color, and then you go to like secondary color, maybe third color. Does this bird have any patterns? Field marks we'll get into a little bit. It's kind of pointing out the eye line, the crown. Does it have a mustache? Those are specific points that you want to look at. And like I said, the beak and the feet. They also have certain colors, like bald eagles, for example. One of the things that you notice on an adult bald eagle is they have that bright yellow beak and bright yellow feet. So that's something that's particular that you could think about. All right, so with colors, what do you see? What do you notice first with these two birds? The top one, you probably notice more about the head, the black crown. Okay, and the bottom bird, you probably notice the gray color. And then something that is tough about birds is that they don't always sit still for you. So you do have to get kind of quick at focusing in on the different colors and the different parts. Sometimes, I've been looking at birds and, like, oh, I saw this and I saw this. And then, somebody next to you is like, well, I saw this and I saw this on the bird. And it's like, oh, okay. So that's why going out in group is kind of helpful, because everybody's kind of seeing different parts of the bird. Because when they're moving fast and they're searching around for food, you don't see as much as you would like to. So kind of 6 eyes are better than 2, right? So the first colors that you notice are going to be like a good indicator of where you want to kind of hone in on your search. Okay, and then the other colors, the secondary and tertiary colors, are also helpful. Okay, you might want to move the sidebar. I know I have everyone's pictures kind of in a line, but if you move the screen around, you can kind of see the pictures to the right. So are there any patterns that you see? So like on their backs when their wings are folded, does it look like a checkerboard? Does it look stripy? Do they have streaks on their chest? What do you notice? What are the parts that you see? And with these two birds that I have here, you can actually kind of see some of the markings that we'll be getting into soon. But if you look at the top bird, it's got kind of a checker pattern on its back. And then the one at the bottom actually has kind of lines of where the wings are and the colors. So it kind of has stripes. And then on the chest, very lightly on both of them, they kind of have some streaking, which they're kind of like lines, but they're very, they're not very defined lines. So that's kind of what that is. All right.
Hey, Maggie.
Yeah.
To interrupt you really quick, we have some questions of when the birds are showing up on the screen, the last two birds, what were those?
Oh, okay. Oh, you want me to give away my secrets now? I will, and then, it'll be a test later on. So these two birds, I can go back here. So the top one is the black-capped chickadee. Many of you probably know this bird. They're very feisty. They're though small, and they make themselves known pretty well. So they're one of the most common birds that you might encounter, and they're also in a lot of decorative pieces at this time of year for the holidays. And then the bottom one is just as prevalent, but maybe not as noted. It's a tufted titmouse. Okay. And then these two right here, the top one is the red-bellied woodpecker. It does have a red head, but it's not the red-headed woodpecker that sometimes comes into our area, but they have a very, like, they have a full red head, though their back is very similar to this one. So this is the red-bellied at the top, and the bottom is the white-throated sparrow. And so to kind of get into the next part is we're talking about markings. And so the difference between patterns and markings are where they're located. So patterns are just kind of like the overall like colors and, way the feathers are laid out. But then the field markings are the ones that are going to give you a little more, like, kind of bring the focus in even closer of narrowing what that bird is, because it's like a specific placement of either a color or a design that is going to be a great indicator. So for example, that the top bird, the red-bellied, they have the red at the back of their head. That's one indicator of that particular species. And then the lower, the white-throated sparrow, well, what do you think the name white-throated sparrow, if you look at its little chin there, it's got the white. And something else that it does have is it has the I was thinking the red-bellied, the yellow kind of almost looks like eyeshadow gone bad, and has that little yellow spot. So that's something that's like an indicator of that particular species. So you might see species of sparrows that have the brown, have the streaking, have the patterns, but only the white-throated is going to have that white throat patch and the yellow above its eye. Okay, so that's something that is a little like a distinction between the markings and patterns. Okay, so we're going to take a little closer look at the field markings. So we just happen to have a white-throated sparrow in the diagram, so that's kind of helpful. So you can see under the chin where the white throat is, the yellow spot, the crown is the top of the head. So many indicators of a species are any striping, or like the black-capped chickadee had the whole head encased in the black coloring. And if you look to the picture on the right, you can see some more examples where they might have a stripe that goes through the eye. They might have a gap and have a couple stripes on the head. Around the eye, they might have an eye ring. Okay, so that it looks like it almost looks like kind of like a bigger eye. If you think about like a cartoon where they have the cute eyes that are really big, and they have the white, and like they have the black in the middle. They're kind of exaggerated, so that's kind of what the eye ring looks like. And then the rest of the body, there are, the patterns, the different colors, but there is also markings to make note of. Sometimes I got the little arrow. It's not the best because it's white on white, but they're wing bars. So a lot of times some birds will have on there, we have the primary feathers, and then we have a set of secondary feathers right here up at the top, and those are the flight feathers. And sometimes at the tips, there might be another color. So we call those wing bars. Okay. And then if they have them or not, that's a good thing to look at, like when you're looking through your guidebook. Okay, I saw like little stripes on the wings. Okay, was it when it was sitting, or was it when it was flying? Because depending on if the wing is open or closed, that will also give indication of what when you see the wing bars. A lot of times on the tail, when they're flying, um, you might see certain color patterns, and sometimes on the rump, there's a little bird called a um, yellow rumped warbler, and they're also called lovingly butterbutts, because they have that indicator right there on the rump. Not all birds will have these different parts. Some are a little more difficult to tell the difference. Like, sparrows, a lot of people in the birding world joke about, we call them little brown jobbers, or um, little brown birds, because they're pretty much what you say they are. They're little and they're brown. It's just you have to look more detail at these field markings, like do they have a stripe through the eye? Do they have stripes on the crown? Do they have any wing bars? Do they have streaks on the chest? So there's a lot of challenges you can give yourself, and there's some things that are, a little more straightforward and helpful, and that's why we're going through these today. Okay. So here's an example of kind of what you're looking for. Oops. I'm trying to move my screen back. This little thing. Okay, here we go. So with the field markings, this is an example of a white-crowned sparrow, which is a sparrow that isn't really in our neighborhood too often. Sometimes it comes from the north if you got a really cold winter. They might be one of those birds on the list that people are always looking for, not your regular neighborhood birds. And, a few things that you want to look at are, the crown. Where are the stripes located on the head? Where are they on the body? You could see that there's no streaking on the chest, so there's no patterns on the chest, but it's got the streakings in it's got the stripes on the head. So those are the different parts that you look at to kind of help make your life a little easier. I did mention feet before. Some will have pink feet. Some birds will have black feet. Some will have yellow feet, depending on the bird, especially if you get into waterfowl, especially like the shorebirds, like the kinds that are like in the same family as rails and herons, and that their legs are very particular, some of them that you can see very well, and they help steer you in the right direction, like greater yellow legs. So keeping those in mind, even if they're a little bird right now as you're learning, just get used to looking at these different parts and training yourself to just take a closer look. And like I said, start wide and narrow down the focus so that you have, look at the color and everything like that, and then start looking at detail as you go. All right. So another thing to look at, as I mentioned, were the beaks, because the beak is going to tell you a lot about that bird, where it's going to be, what it's going to be doing, where it's going to be looking for food, because their beak is their fork and knife. That will help them, get into their food, whatever it is, whether it's seeds or another animal. It also helps them feed its young, which is very important. And they also preen with their beak. So that's very important for their hygiene, because there are a lot of, ways that feathers can get wet, can get dirty, and, have pests. So they have to make sure that they take care of themselves, and their beak is a very important thing. So on this chart that's next to me, or on the right side, and so you can see that if you look down the list, We have different shapes and kind of what they do. So if you've got a small, kind of very compact beak, that's something that's going to break seeds, something that's like kind of like a nutcracker. If you don't usually see them very much, and I'm not talking about the nutcracker from the ballet, but the one where you can actually, it kind of looks like a little, um, it looks like a tool. It doesn't really look like it belongs in your kitchen, but it has like a little handle part, and then it has you put the nut in the middle and you crack it. That's kind of what their beaks do, and some even go above and beyond that, and they actually have like a split kind of forked beak. And what that does is it helps pry open seeds like pine cone seeds, so that they can, get the seeds off of the pine cone and then break that down farther. Um, Shredder beaks are, birds of prey. They have that hooked bill, very good for ripping and tearing meat, because that's what they eat. So you have to have definitely the fork and the knife, not just the fork. Chisels, like woodpeckers, are long and very pronounced. They're very thick and strong. So they're going to be, they're banging their beak into a tree, which, they go for trees that are already, dying or dead or have some infestation, so that they are a little weaker than a living tree, for them to get their food, like insects or like ants or beetle larvae. But they still have to get through trees, and trees are tough, so they have a nice strong bill. Hummingbirds have what you consider a probe, because it's long and it goes into the flower, and they have the long tongue that can grab the nectar. You've got strainers that have, like our dabbling ducks, they're really flat, but they have little ridges along the top and the bottom. And what they do is they, dip down, they grab plants, but they also have to kind of strain the water out, so they're not eating as much or drinking as much water as they're eating food. And sometimes they, can, feed on the surface where there's like little plants. Then you have your birds like herons and kingfishers that are the fish-eating birds, and amphibians that are nearby water, and they have a spear, and they often have little ridges along the beak as well. So they almost kind of remind you of the chisel, but they're longer and they are a little thinner. So they're not as sturdy as maybe the woodpecker, because the job is different. Then you have the insect eating tweezers. So they're very fine, very kind of small, because all they're doing is grabbing an insect either on a leaf or in the air, and they don't have to be too tough to crush their exoskeletons. And then you have other birds like that fall into this area, like crows and blue jays, where they can do almost anything with their beak. So we call them the Swiss Army knife, because they can hunt. Like crows will eat sometimes baby birds or chipmunks, but they'll also be able to get into our garbage bags and make a mess. So they're very adaptable and very smart. So they will figure it out, and their body has evolved to be able to keep up with their brain. So we got a little test here. All right. So we have 4 birds and their beaks. Each one has a different job. So if you'd like to, participate and mute yourself or unmute yourself, what do you think this first bird does? Everyone's probably have, seen this bird on multiple occasions. They're very prevalent at this time of year with the holidays. So if you'd like to share or shout out, what do you think this bird eats? What kind of beaks does this job do?
I see in the chat here that somebody said cracker and someone said that it eats seeds.
Yes, very good. So our northern cardinal is a seed eater. You see how thick it is, and there's a lot of, I mean, it's a small bird, but probably for the size, probably puts on a lot of pounds per pressure for that little bird, that little beak. Awesome, good job. And then I can't see the chat, so this is perfect, Nadia. If you want to do, if everyone wants to do this. For this bird right here, what kind of beak is this?
I see Glenn again coming in with probe.
Oh, very close, because it does probe, but it does something before it probes. In order to get what it really desires, it kind of has to go through the tree. So it has a bigger job.
I see spear and chisel come in.
All right, so chisel definitely, because it does a lot of the breaking up. Beaks are many of them are multi-use, maybe not as much as a crow's, but they do have to probe in there. And something that people don't really think about is that beaks are actually made of the same material as our hair, as feathers, and our fingernails. So they actually have a very thin material on their beak that they actually can feel. They have a nerve, they have a nervous system that does, go through where they feel. I actually have chickens at home, so I'm always seeing them. If I, come over with different pair of shoes, they'll come over and they'll like peck at my feet because they're different. And then after like a moment, they're like, oh, okay, it's nothing that we're interested in, and they go on looking for seeds. But that's how they, they don't have fingers or hands, so that's another way that they can get to know. So they do probe with it, but mostly chisel is like the big thing. And then this bird right here, this is an eastern phoebe. I kind of gave the name. This was a pileated woodpecker. So what do you think this is, what this beak is going to do?
I see tweezer.
Yeah, so it is, it is an insect catcher. So what they do is they actually can actually fly and catch insects on the wing. They're really awesome little birds, and we'll see them around the mid to late March. They're one of my favorites, but they're not technically supposed to be around right now because they are insect eaters. But they kind of are the first to come and take their time to go. So, and then this one right here, this beak has, what is its specialty?
Is it a shredder?
Yes, it is. All right, good job, everyone. All right, so looking at feet.
Which bird was that? Sorry,
Oh,
Maggie.
that was, sorry, this was I'm trying to remember. I think it was a young Cooper's hawk. I think it was a young Cooper's hawk. I'm trying to remember. I wrote everything down on my notes, but I might have forgotten that one. Yes, it was a young Cooper's hawk, because when they become mature, they actually get the red eye and more of a gray cap. So yeah, so that was a Cooper hawk, which some of you may have seen if you have a feeder at home. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so feet help the bird acquire food. So they will give you some information. It also helps with the bird moving around. Sometimes a bird is quite mobile on the ground. Sometimes really all they do is fly from perch to perch, but it will also help with nest building. So feet are important, and they can also give us a lot of information. So you have climbing feet, you have swimming feet, running feet. Like if you think of road runners, their specialties with running, and other birds like ostrich and emus that we don't really have around here, but You never know. You also have perching feet. They tend to have their toes in a specific order. You might notice that the toes vary a little bit. You have grasping and then you have scratching. So kind of like our chicken friends. Okay, so we have a couple examples of feet, and a few of you, as we get ready for a special event here at Teatown, this might seem a little familiar. Anyone want to guess at whose feet these are and what their main job is?
We have a guess of it, an eagle.
Beautiful, yes, the bald eagle. You can actually see the white tail back here and the brown body here. And they, like I said before, they particularly have, as adults, they have yellow feet and a yellow bill, but their feet are actually remain yellow throughout their whole life. Whereas when they're young, their beak actually starts off kind of more brown and then becomes yellow as they get older, because the beak actually, it doesn't peel, but it wears down, so they can, you know, kind of grow that new layers of cells of keratin. Okay, so this one's a little funny. The one all the way on the left, you see that it doesn't look like a normal bird that we think about. Anybody want to take a guess at whose feet those might be? Like what group of birds that might belong to? It's very different.
Someone suggested perching.
A what?
If the feet are for perching, and somebody else asked if it was a downy woodpecker.
Ooh, so it can be used for perching, but it is a woodpecker. So woodpeckers have very funny feet, and I love the name because it's called each one has like a scientific name that goes with it, and it's been many years since my ornithology class, so forgive me for not remembering everything. But this is the best one. This is the one that you can use when you play Scrabble. It's zygodactyl. Pretty good word, right? So zygodactyl means that they have the ability, it basically makes an X. You can kind of see it looks more like a K in this picture, but they have an X, but what they can do is they can take this toe and move it up here to perch. So kind of like what you think of a regular perching bird with the 3 toes in the front and the 1 in the back. So they can switch their toes around, which is pretty cool. All right, so that is from a woodpecker, a downy woodpecker. And then what about this one on the bottom? Any guesses as to what this bird would do or where it might be found?
Someone asked if they're for swimming.
Yes, very good. It's very different than, you know, when we think of ducks, you know, we have the webbed, but this is kind of a different kind of webbed. But it is a bird that can be found around here. And does anybody
We have
know
a
what?
guess of an American coot.
Yes, so we have somebody who knows what they're talking about. Good. So they have
Stacy.
very different feet, but they're basically made to help them, you know, swim, but also kind of stay on top of mud. So they do a good job at that. And then we have one more bird here. If you want to guess the bird, great. But if you want to guess at the function of the feet, what its main job?
Someone said perching, and we have a guess of a snowy egret.
Oh, that's a good guess, but it's actually an American robin. Kind of threw you off with you can't really see the belly there. It's in shadow, but it kind of looks lighter. But good job. That is a perching bird. They've got the 3 toes in the front, 1 in the back. And a lot of times when we think of robins, we actually think of them on the lawn. because they will eat worms and other insects that are down there. And, you know, we don't really see their feet as much, but they do, especially at this time of year, a lot of times you'll see them kind of clump together with other robins, and they kind of disappear into the forest. So they do a lot of perching in the forest at this time of year, and you know, kind of get away from our lawns because they're usually frozen or, you know, covered with snow, maybe, depending on the year. Okay, so something else you want to look at is the body shape and how the bird sits. So I kind of have to keep moving my screen around a little bit, but you can see how these are 3 birds, and they're about, I tried to make them about kind of the size relative to one another. They're all different sizes, and a lot of times, if you've ever played like a guessing game where, you know, you think of an object and, you know, someone's like, oh, is it bigger than a bread box? Not many people have bread boxes now, but that was kind of like the go-to answer or guess. And a lot of people use robins as kind of like the baseline. Is it the size of a robin? Is it bigger than a robin? Is it smaller than a robin? And then you kind of go from there. So robins are kind of like the baseline for the size of a bird. If you look at them, you usually see they're a little more upright, you know, pushing out their rusty chest and looking, and they have that nice yellow bill that's very, very prominent. So they kind of sit upright a little bit. And then you've got this one down here in the middle. And a lot of times you see this bird and he's kind of longer, or she, could be a she. This one is, you know, a little more longer, not bigger than a robin, but it's a little longer, and it's usually perched where it's leaning forward a lot. Okay, and the one on the bottom is basically a ball with a tail. So you can see how, you know, these 3 birds, that they can be found in the same area at any given moment, they look very, very different. Different size, different, how they hold themselves is very different. So those are questions that you kind of ask yourself when you're trying to figure out a bird. How is it sitting? How's it standing? And like talking to yourself is not a bad thing, because you'll give yourself good answers. So we do have, anybody have questions on what we have here?
Can you
So,
confirm all the species for everyone? We have some really good guesses, I think, here.
all right. So the top one is the American robin. The lower one, not the lowest, but the middle one is the white-breasted nuthatch. And those are some really cool birds. They're very neat. They just do things that other birds can't do. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the one on the bottom is actually the golden crowned kinglet. So when we're kind of talking about shape, is, you know, they look like they don't have any neck. They're very small. They're one of the smallest birds that we have around here. And they pretty much only visit us in the wintertime, you know, late fall, early winter. And one of their characteristic field markers is that white, that yellow crown. There's also the yellow, I'm getting my colors confused today. Sorry. We also have the ruby crowned kinglet, and they have like a little red stripe, and they also have like a full whatchamacallit, eyeline, the white eyeliner, the white eye ring, whereas this one has like a little, like kind of half ring, but it has a little mustache. And they has, if you look right here, it's got the white wing bar. Okay, so very nice. Okay, we got some good guesses. All right, so something else to look at is the flight pattern. So when they're coming into the, you know, where you're looking, or whether they're coming in for a landing on the feeder, there's a certain way that they might fly in. So when birds fly, a lot of times, you know, we think about them, you know, flapping their wings like this, but they actually are so fast that we really don't see it, but they actually make a figure 8 with their wings. So they really have to push down and push back at the same time so that they can get pushed up into the air and move forward. Otherwise, birds would just be like in one spot going up and down, and they wouldn't get very far and probably get eaten by lots of predators. Don't think they would mind, but we would because we like having birds around. But they're really cool, especially if you see like a slow motion video. You can really see how their wings move because they want to push down and push back at the same time. Well, sometimes depending on the bird, when they're flying, they might flap and then tuck their wings in, so they have kind of an undulating, kind of like a, undulating, I guess that's the best word, undulating movement, where they go up because they pushed off and they start dropping a little bit, and then they go up and they start dropping. So so it's like whoosh, whoosh. And then other birds, they're very consistent, like constant flapping. And then others might flap, 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 glide for a little bit, flap, 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 glide. If they have the ability to, use the wind in their favor. So many birds have like kind of a signature. It's kind of like how their markings are specific to a certain species. A lot of their flight patterns are specific to a species. Okay, so here's our little friend again, and you can see why I like them so much because they're very, very different. This little bird will walk down the tree. So, and they'll, walk under a branch, like upside down, whereas like the black-capped chickadee, a lot of times they'll hang upside down, but they won't really walk upside down for very long. But the white-breasted nuthatch will walk down trees upside down, or walk down trees, walk upside down. They're pretty cool at defying gravity and doing their thing. But a couple things that you want to pay in mind are, where are the birds and what are they doing? Obviously, we're kind of focused on, feeder birds and birds that you're going to find in your backyard. But if you, do go out and you hike in different areas besides, Teatown or Rockefeller or FDR, even along the Hudson River, you'll see birds everywhere and they'll all be doing different things. So kind of seeing where they are, and that's why watching them for a little bit will give you more information. A lot of times you see them flying right by you, but you're not going to gather as much information. If you can see them in like immersed in their habitat, you'll get a lot of information. So, are they at your feeder? Are they feeding at your feeder or are they feeding below it? Because some birds are, they're not the cleanest eaters sometimes. So especially if a squirrel happens on your on your feeder, food, it tends to go everywhere. So you have birds that stick to the feeders, and then you have some birds that will be below and feed on the ground level. So, it's like a multi-tier, but certain birds will only stay on the ground and certain birds will, will go both, and some will just stay at the feeder. On the trees, where are they? Are they on the trunk? Are they, perched on a branch? Are they up high in the tree or are they down lower? Are they at the base of the tree? So especially when we come into spring and we get some of the migrants, some birds, you'll hear them, but you won't see them very easily because they're way up at the top of the crown of the tree. So, and that's where they tend to stay. So keeping all these questions in mind and asking yourself these questions will help you start to, narrow it down and identify. And then, what are they looking for? Sometimes you can see, like obviously at a feeder, they're looking for seeds. Sometimes if they're on grasses or shrubs that have fruit, you can see what they're going for. Sometimes you can't, but you can guess. But those are all good questions to ask and, see what they're doing. And the longer you watch them, the more information they'll give you. Okay, so this is like kind of the more interactive part that I was talking about. So many of these guys that we're going to be looking at, and gals, will be birds that that are in your neighborhood. You already know. But what I want to do is focus on kind of what are the parts that we've been looking at, like, what are the characteristics? Do you see any field markings? What are the main colors? What do you notice about this bird? So I don't know if it would work easier for if a couple people want to write in the chat certain things that you notice. And then Nadia, if you want to read that.
Sure. Keep an eye out here. All right, someone said that it was perching.
Okay. Good. So we got a perching bird.
With a black cap and a tiny beak.
Yeah. So good.
And a round body and a white breast. These are great.
Yeah.
That's a chickadee.
Awesome. It is a chickadee. Very good. A black cap chickadee. So the field markings to note the most is the black cap, hence its name, but it also has the little black chin and the white along the bottom. It is perching, and even though it has a small beak, it's still a little bit thicker. So it does eat seeds. Okay, so we talked about this one already, but what are some field marks that you notice about this bird? So we're just going to focus on the field marks.
The crest?
Yep. Awesome. Any other ones?
That
Are
it's
they
a gray
dimorphic?
crest.
Yes, the crest, and there was something else?
I asked if there was a difference between males and females.
Not really with these guys. That's why I kind of keep saying guys, which is not the best. This little creature, they pretty much have probably more like a slight size dimorphism, but pretty much just upon looking at them, you can't really tell the difference. Something you might also note with this picture, you can actually see how its beak is a little more rounded. So they're good at breaking down seeds. It also has this little spot right here on kind of like in between its eyes, above its beak, a little dark spot. But most of its body is gray. Can't see the other side, but we already saw this bird, so I figured I didn't want to make it too easy for you. But it's got the nice kind of buff chest, and this is a tufted titmouse. But just even like looking at the birds you already know and just taking a closer look, you already know them, so you don't have to learn them, but you can take a closer look at what their markings are, what their patterns are, what their behavior is. So that way, when you see the birds you don't know, you can kind of maybe compare like, oh, okay, well, this bird is similar to this bird in this way, but it's got these colorings. So, it helps you narrow down your search the more you get to know. So even if you're like, I know that bird, take a closer look. It's always good to know a little bit more about these guys and gals. So this is one that does have the sexual dimorphism in their coloring. Many of you have seen the one on the left, and you may have seen the one on the right, but she's designed to be a little more incognito at times, especially during the nesting season. So field markings, colors, what do you notice?
Well, the male has that mask, which is just so distinctive.
Yep.
even if it's a young one and the red is paler, the mask is still very defined.
Yeah, very good. And it's funny because on my clock that I have here, it's it's this hour. It's very, very good that it added up so nicely. I did that on purpose. So who are these birds?
In the chat, we have cardinals.
Yay, northern cardinals, very good. And they're really fun to observe too, especially if you have a pair, because they will actually help each other, like not only with nesting and everything, but like I remember one time I was sitting in a sit spot, and that's like another thing I want to talk about a little later, is that you just sit and you just observe nature, and the more you sit in that spot like consistently, even just for like 15 minutes every day, you start to notice a lot around you, because the birds get used to you. The animals that live near you, like they're used to your smell or whatever. You become a part of the scenery. And I remember sitting and I was looking up and I saw the female come perch on a branch, and then the male came in and he perched next to her, and then they touched beaks, and then they flew off. It was really sweet. I mean, I don't know what kind of romance they have, but it was just really like a touching moment for me, hopefully for them too. So this little spicy bird also doesn't have a neck that we can see. Its feathers kind of hide it very well. But what do you notice about this bird? It's one of my favorites because they're very, very sassy.
A long beak, a sharp little beak.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so it's a little longer than like the chickadee or the tufted titmouse. So, you know, it's longer, but it's like also kind of thinner too.
We also have a note about its round body.
Yep.
And someone has made a guess as to what it is and mentions that they hear them calling all the time, which on a personal note, having one that lives right outside my window, I can attest to the fact that they do make themselves known. Somebody else has commented on its yellow belly.
Very good. Yeah, so it kind of has like kind of the yellower buff color belly. You might notice that, you know, it's got the patterns of like a little lattice on its tail and wings. Tiny wing bar. I don't know that it'll be really noted, but you can kind of see it. And you might notice, I don't know if anyone's going to comment on this kind of white eyebrow that's over the eye. Okay, so what was the guess?
Carolina wren.
Awesome. Yes. One of my favorites because they're like super spunky little birds. For the size and the way they throw their voice, it's like truly amazing. As you can tell, I really like birds. Okay, we talked about this one already, so we'll go through this one quickly. But field markings.
Yellow above the eye.
Yep, the yellow above the eye. Awesome.
With a black cap.
It's got the black, yep, the black striping. And if you remember what this bird is, what's the final marking that's kind of under its beak?
White-throated sparrow.
Awesome, very good. So the white-throated sparrow. So even if you know these guys, just taking a little bit closer look will help you improve your birding skills. So this is a little bird that you may or may not have noticed. You will not see them in the wintertime because they're not around here. Sorry, the summertime because they're not around here, but you will see them in the winter. And they are very particular because if you notice, we've been looking at birds with a specific color beak. Many of the beaks that we've been looking at have been darker, but this beak kind of stands out a little bit more. All right. And you can't see from this picture is that, well, you can kind of see where my arrow is going. It's white and white. You see that it's kind of white over here, whereas this part of the tail is gray. So a field marking that I'm going to give you, since you can't really see from here, but maybe it'll click, is that when this bird flies, it will actually, the tail will spread out and you'll see two white stripes with gray in the middle. So any guesses of this little bird?
So someone has guessed a state-colored junco.
Yeah, slate color junco. Very good. Or also known as a dark-eyed junco. I know some of the names have changed, and some of the names that I traditionally use have changed, and I forget that they changed. And then some of them, you know, they change them every so often. But yeah, so either slate colored or dark-eyed junco. But they tend to breed up in like the Catskills and the Adirondacks. So they grace us with their presence in the wintertime because it's a little too much for them. But we get to share their beauty for a little while. All right. So this is somebody that you may or may not see. But if you see them, they're actually pretty good to see because they have a little bit more, a brighter color, but it's more of a wash. So you can kind of see that they kind of look like our little brown birds, but they're a little different. So if you look at the beak, you can tell that, you know, they don't eat meat, they don't eat insects. So they're also have that nice strong bill for eating seeds. So you might find them at your feeder. So any guesses?
We have two guesses, a house finch or a purple finch.
All right, good, because you know they're very similar, but this one is actually a house finch, and because they tend to have like a little bit lighter wash, and the purple finch is a little more bold, and I think the house finch tends to be a little more frequent visitor to most neighborhoods. I think. All right, this one's a little tricky. So in the wintertime and in the fall, what does happen when you start getting into when you get farther into birding, like if you're a beginner, like totally beginner, this is something you'll learn if you have experience with birds, and then you might know this, that at the end of the summer, when breeding season's over, a lot of times birds will go through a molt, getting ready for fall. All birds will molt and get rid of their summer feathers because they don't need to be warm anymore or cool anymore. They need to get warm. I'm like getting opposite today, sorry. So they'll grow in a new coat that has a little more under, like the downy underneath. And so when they do that, they'll have their non-breeding plumage. So this bird right here, many of them will stay the same even if they molt, like the chickadee and the tufted titmouse and the cardinal, but other birds, especially warblers, so when they're migrating through in the spring, they're going to look one way. When they migrate back through in the fall, they're going to look a little different. But this bird right here is definitely one that we see in the summer with a little different coat on, and we get to enjoy, especially if you start learning to bird by ear. It helps make things a little bit easier too, to put things together. But right now at this time of year, this is what a male will look like. Both the males and females have a little sexual dimorphism. So the males are going to look one way and the females are going to look a little different. But this bird has a nice thicker beak. They tend to like small seeds like thistle and chicory. And they have white wing bars, very strong white wing bars, and a nice lighter patch here. any guesses or
Oh
observations
yeah,
that you can
everyone's
make?
all in on this one with
All
the
right,
American goldfinch.
perfect, beautiful. Yeah, so the goldfish, fish, oh my goodness, it's been apparently a long day. The goldfinch is, this is a male who is in his non-breeding plumage. Females look very similar all year round, but in the in the spring they will molt again and they'll get that beautiful like black cap, like kind of at the back of their head, and they have that beautiful yellow color, that golden color. All right, okay. So this is somebody that you see, probably have seen around. Maybe you've heard them more than you've seen them. They've got those zygodactyl feet. Hopefully everyone remembers that for the next time we play play Scrabble. Okay, so you notice that its posture is different. Where it's located is a little different, and I'm sure you guys can narrow it down to, I'm sure a few of you can narrow down to what kind of bird this is, but what group it belongs to as well. So what are our guesses, Nadia?
So we have downy woodpecker in here.
All right, yes. And downy woodpeckers are our smallest woodpeckers that you'll find. They definitely have a very similarly color, like a similar colored neighbor called a hairy that you can find in this area, but the biggest difference is the length of the bill and the size. If you can put them together side by side, you'll see that the downy's smaller and the hairy's bigger. But usually, you know, nature likes to give us something to work for, right? So usually you won't find them right next to each other, but one of the key things that kind of helps me is that downies, besides a smaller size, is that their beak is shorter than their head, whereas a hairy will have a longer beak that's going to be about like the same length of its head. So that kind of what has helped me. Everybody, you know, starts to learn different things as they bird. Like I mentioned, songs. This one doesn't have a song, but other songbirds will have certain songs that you can kind of make a little rhyme with or whatever, and that will help you learn, you know, as you go. You kind of have to get a little silly, get a little creative, and it kind of makes it more fun. So we have the downy, and then we did look at this one before, and this is actually the first picture that I showed was a female, and this is the male. So there's not too much different, except for the field marking is the biggest indicator. What do we got?
All right, we just got one in, red-bellied woodpecker.
Awesome, very good. So it's kind of funny that it's called the red-bellied because you don't really notice the wash as much. Some of them are more prominent, but if you do meet, so the biggest thing between a male and female around here is the crest on the head. So it's not a true crest, it's, you know, the stripe from the top. On the female, you probably remember that it was at the back. So it's not as prominent on the female, though she still has that. A true red-headed woodpecker would have a full red head and a little more strikingly different whiter chest. And they're not really around here that much. Like every summer for like 5 years in a row, and I was always like, I'm gonna go and see it. There was one that was hanging out at Muscoot, and I never got over there because summer gets really busy for us here at Teatown. So that didn't quite happen, but you know, they are around sometimes, and they're pretty cool. But this is a red-bellied. They're here year round, and a lot of times they'll visit our feeders as well. Okay, so you know, I kind of talked about feeders because they're a great tool to use to start to get to know some of our songbirds and, you know, woodpeckers that we'll visit. because they're opportunistic too for seeds. So couple of things that you might want to think about if you want to set up a feeder is have it in a place around your yard that has cover. If you have it in the wide open, it leaves the birds a little more vulnerable to predators, especially aerial predators like Cooper hawks. And so you kind of want to, give them a little space so that they can, hide in shrubs nearby. Also, you want enough space between the feeder and your house. If they get spooked, which, birds are often flighty because they kind of have to be to survive. If they get spooked and they fly and they can't get the lift to get over your house, they might hit the wall, they might hit a window. So make sure there's enough room so that when they do have to fly quickly away to seek shelter, they're not going to run into your house. Windows are also something that you want to keep in mind. Obviously, you want your feeder close to a window or close enough in a direction of a window so that you can, observe these birds. However, something that you can do is put something on the window just to break up the reflection, because birds don't see the same thing, the same way that we do. And a lot of times they'll run into a window that's very clear because it looks like an escape route, and they'll hit it, and they could possibly die from that impact. They're going full tilt. They think they're getting away, and bam. So we don't want to do that. So having something, either on the inside of your window to kind of break up that clear, clear view. So, sometimes there are decals that can be put up for decoration, or even having like the panes and put in, because usually have one piece of glass, but you can put in the little wooden pieces. Something that just helps break that up a little bit. Best time to put up feeders is in November. You can even wait till December and then take them down in April. But once you start feeding them, you kind of have to commit until spring, because they're going to be coming around. There is food out there, but if it's a particularly tough winter and you want to give them, the best chance of survival, the best thing is to, keep it going. You can start now even, but you just have to keep going until April. Okay. And, if a hawk visits your feeder, which sometimes like a young hawk, like a young Cooper hawk will, find a hopeful easy meal at your feeder, what you can do is take the feeder down for a couple of days and then put it back up, and the hawk would have moved on by then, because the birds wouldn't be around looking for food. So it'll move on as well. And then you can start feeding the birds again. If you don't remove the feeder after April, the birds are still going to find food and come, even though they don't really need that food because now it's springtime and things are growing, but other creatures might. And that's something that the cute is a big a big thing that you probably don't want to deal with. So taking your feeders in at the end of the winter, so early April, is a good time to do that. That way you're not going to invite any guests that you really don't want to feed. Bears are cool and nice, but they're good from a distance when they find their own food that you don't provide them. Because then if you do provide them food, they will keep coming back and look for it. So you don't want that to happen. And I know Nadia can talk a lot about bears too. So if you have any questions, we could probably answer some of those later on. So some of the different resources that I find very helpful are the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They have a website called All About Birds, and it is chock full with so much information about identification, life habits, behavior, migration, like everything you want to know in a short amount text on their website will tell you what you want to know. They're really amazing. And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology does offer many different classes. Some of the citizen science projects that we'll be talking about in a couple of minutes actually were set up by Cornell, and they are probably one of the biggest resources that it's almost one-stop shopping. So I know when the pandemic started, you know, they offered classes at a discounted rate. So a lot of people got into birding because they had the time, they were home, they had the materials nearby. As long as you have internet connection, a window, then you're all set. So that's definitely something to look at. There are tons of, I don't know about tons, but there are a lot of phone apps that you can use if you know you are out on the trail. You can easily, you know, open your phone and pick up like the Audubon or the Merlin, you know, beforehand, you know, while you have service, and then take it out, and you've got the pictures. You have so it's basically like a book, but just in your phone, in your device, and you can look at the different pictures. So you got an adult, you got an immature, you got male, female, non-breeding season, breeding season. You've got calls and songs of the birds if they're, you know, up in the north, if they're in the south, if they're in the west, you know, depending on what their range is. So you have so much in your little hand. So it's a great resource. I personally I have the Merlin app, and they have kind of a little, it's not a dichotomous key, but it kind of helps you move through. What's cool is like you put in your date, the date and where you are, and you know what different characteristics that we went through earlier. You add those in, like, okay, what's the size of the bird? What are the colors? And it kind of goes through that, and it kind of narrows down what that bird might be. You know, sometimes there's surprises, but at least like you have something to start with. So that's a great guide. And I know a lot of people talk about the Audubon one with just as much accolades. So if you are also like me and you also like holding something in your hand, I really enjoy like the Sibley's guide. It is quite large. So like, I don't think you want to go hiking with this. So you can see how big it is compared to my head. So it is a big book that if you are hiking and training to ascend certain mountains, you might want to carry it with you. Otherwise, you know, carrying it in your phone is a little bit probably easier for you. Or there are other guides that are a little smaller. I enjoy the Peterson's guide because it actually points out all the field markers that you're looking for on that bird. And they're drawn pictures, and you know, they've been around for a long time. And then I also like the Stokes guide. I also pictured that here as well, because that uses photographs, because drawings are great, but in a sense they're kind of biased because you know, colors kind of pop a little bit more in the pictures, whereas in the field guides, they blend in a little bit more with actual photos. So you can see a little more of the subtleties with that guide. And if you're like me, you might have several guides and are very happy with all of them. You can also use your local resources like Teatown. That's why you're all here. Also, the Sawmill and Bedford, the Sawmill River and Bedford Audubons are also great resources for birding excursions. I know things have pared down because of the pandemic, but there are also webinars that they have offered. We will be having during our Eagle Fest week, we'll be having Ann Swain from Sawmill River Audubon doing her her webinar about raptors and identifying raptors in our area. And she's an amazing birder. So if you know you can get out with her, definitely recommend recommend that. And there are other great birders from Bedford and Teatown as well. So there are a lot of resources that you can, have at home or out and about. So the last bit we're going to talk about is citizen science. So if you're, outside, if you're outside or you're inside and just looking at birds, observing, you can actually take some of that information and log it through a few different programs. And so what you're doing is you're collecting data and you're sharing it with the professional community. And, people who are in that profession, there's only a few of them, and they can only bring themselves so far into four corners of the earth. Whereas, like citizen scientists, we're everywhere. We have time, or maybe it's a little project that we like to, we're getting into a little bit. So we're everywhere, and we can share some of our experiences and our observations to help birds in the future, and help provide scientists with the data that they need to, help where they can. So, like I said, these projects can be very easygoing. Like I said, 15 minutes, looking out at your bird feeder, seeing who's arrived within those 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and then you're done. And other projects are a little more, you have to go out and maybe into the woods a little bit. But it's kind of, what's nice is it's up to you, what you have time for, what your interest is, and what your preferences are. So, and that's actually me. That was on Hook Mountain, and we were looking for migrating hawks that I'll talk about in a little bit. So one of my favorite things to do is every year we're involved with the Christmas bird count. It's a National Audubon Society began it 121 years ago. So this was 121st year this year. It's actually the nation's longest running community science birding projects, and maybe longest running community projects in general. And it's a pretty cool program. So you basically go out and you bird, you walk around different areas. Staff at Teatown, we like to invite the public to join us. And, if it's really cold, then maybe it's just us, and we go and we hike certain trails and, count the species and the numbers that we see. Is it easy? No, because, you might have a foot of snow, you might have really cold temperatures, or, the birds might just be hiding, and it's hard to find them right away because, a storm front is moving in, and, they're buckling down. So, every year is a little different, but it is a lot of fun. And you guesstimate a little bit about how many are in a flock that fly overhead, like how many geese that is, or, how many white-throated sparrows are in that patch of, that patch of briars over there. And, you do the best you can, but what happens at the end is, there's kind of a circled area, and I think we're out of, I believe we're out of Peekskill that we put into, but everybody adds, and you collect all the information there. We didn't do it this year, but everyone would get together and exchange, okay, like we saw this bird, how many did you see? And then this bird was seen, and how many did everybody see? And it's just a way to get together and share stories and enjoy each other's birding wisdom. And it's a lot of fun, and it makes for a great day, a long day, but a great day. And what they compilate at the end is they see patterns. This has been happening for over 100 years, so you really see the trends. Like, not many people know that northern cardinals weren't always northern. They actually have moved farther north, they're more of a southern bird, like mid-Atlantic and southern bird, and they've slowly moved up into our area over time. I mean, they've been here long enough for us, but going back, over 100 years, you see how things have changed, and over 18 million birds were counted this year. So that was pretty cool. So if you go onto their website and you look for Christmas bird count, they're still compiling the data, and they'll have maps and everything of the different species, but they have some write-ups right now. It just takes a lot of time. But something that's interesting, Audubon, everyone knows John Jay, and here's a picture of blue jays that he painted. And that was, he was known for, being an early American ornithologist. But back in his time, when they did the Christmas bird count, they actually shot birds and counted them. So luckily things have changed and we're a little more conservation savvy, where we only count them by shooting them with a camera or by checking them on our lists. But there's the link below. The next thing, so that happens like probably mid-December. So the next thing that you can be involved in, if you're really gung-ho, is the Great Backyard Bird Count. And basically this is the nice thing where you just sit, inside, outside, in your backyard, and for like 15 minutes or a half an hour, whatever you want to do, you just count birds that you see. You don't necessarily have to have a feeder, but you can. And it's for, 4 days in February, so that's coming up. So maybe not being sitting outside, but some people are, like that cold, invigorating, winter day. And, all this information, it's between the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the Audubon Society, where they compile all the data and put everything together. And you can easily use eBird or Merlin to upload your data, so you don't even have to like do paperwork or anything. You just sign up and you go for it. So it's really nice. And like I said, nice and easy, but you make a difference. And it's actually something that happens on a global event, which is pretty awesome. Project Feeder Watch, if you already have a feeder, you can sign up for this program. It's through Cornell, and it runs through November through April. So when you would have your feeder up, and basically you choose your site, which is most likely your home, what dates that you want to collect data, and the length of time that you choose to collect the data. So, 15 minutes on these days or half hour on those days. And then you can upload online, or they have a special app that comes with the program. And they do provide a research kit if you choose. There is a fee for this project because of the software that you can download and the kit, but I don't really think it's too much. All right, and then as I mentioned, there are hawk watches. So basically, birds of prey will migrate, specifically birds like the sharp-shinned hawks, American kestrels, broadwing hawks, but also some of the birds of prey that we see year-round. Some of their species will also migrate, and there are many flyways that birds will use, especially birds of prey, because they migrate during the day, but they use the thermals that come off the earth. So on a nice fall day when you've got, the sun heating up the ground and, it starts off a little cool, the heat slowly rises. And what happens is birds of prey, when they migrate, they'll basically catch a thermal, ride it up, and then when it ends, they'll kind of, catch the next one. They'll kind of glide down to the next one and then start low and go to the next one, kind of like, like leapfrog. And this way they don't have to flap as much, so they don't use as much energy. They're very efficient. but there's certain flyways that that you have to find. So they know what to do, but we take advantage of their path. So over in Bedford, there's Chestnut Ridge, and there's a hawk watch station there, and they accept volunteers because they count every day in the fall. So basically, end of September through early November or something like that, there'll be somebody out there. And on their website, you can actually get in touch with one of their naturalists who's in charge of that. And so basically from kind of Bedford, they cross over, and from when they come down from New England, they'll actually come over kind of, I guess that's like where the Tappan Zee Bridge is, or a little bit farther north. And if you're familiar with Hook Mountain on the Palisades, that's another spot that people will go to count hawks or watch for hawks. And that was that picture of me doing that one day. And they'll just fly over because they hit where the Palisades are, is like the heat kind of comes off of there, and they can just glide, down for many miles without hardly flapping. So it's very efficient and effective. Another place that I have here is called Franklin Mountain, and that's in Oneonta. So if you are really a birder, if you're that kind of birder and want to, take a little bit of a trip, Oneonta is not too far. But in the fall, they have the migratory hawks there, but they also have golden eagles that migrate through. We don't typically have golden eagles here. So occasionally they'll come through, but typically they'll come from the north, and then they'll kind of hook to the west, and they'll go along there because there's a little flyway heading west that way. So many years before I became a birder, I was dating somebody who was a big birder, and I was like, how long are we gonna stay here? Okay, that's really cool. I'm ready to go now. But he was really into it, and I'm glad I got to go because I learned. And I eventually uh, gained a passion for birds, so I'm grateful for that opportunity. But that was a really cool place to go. So that's pretty much all that I have, because I know we're running out of time. And I want to thank you all for joining. And we can answer some questions. But happy birding, and my email's below if you have any questions that we don't get to answer tonight.
All right, thanks so much, Maggie.
A lot.
While you exit your screen here, and before we jump into some of the questions in the chat, I just want to make sure that I take a moment here to make sure I mention we have Teatown's Hudson River Eagle Fest coming right up. And this year it's going to look a little bit different. For those of you that haven't been to an Eagle Fest in the past, we celebrate the migration of the eagles up the Hudson River, or down rather, and their entire recovery story. But we obviously can't do things in person in the way that we're used to doing at Croton Point Park. So we're extending it, and we're actually having a series of programs, mostly virtual, between January 30th and February 7th. You can find all this information at teatown.org. But we have a really wonderful lineup of some virtual programs here, everything from Raptors with Christine, who, if you've seen in the past, has brought her bald eagle to share with us. We have Birding and Optics, sponsored by Zeiss, who has been lovely enough to give us some scopes in the past to give out. We have Raptors for Rookies. We have Ornitherapy with Holly Merker. We have some really exciting programming coming up. So I encourage you all to check out the website and sign up and see if you're available for any of it. All right, with that being said, I will go back into the chat here, Maggie, and we have, let's see, our first question is there any specific type of bird seed that people should be putting out right now in January?
Okay, that's a good question. Any specific type of bird seed to put out for your birds right now? I think if you have a specific type that you would like to call in or welcome in, there are different mixes for certain birds. I know, like thistles and the smaller seeds are great for like the American goldfinch. But if you just want to, have anybody stop by, just a general mix is good, because they usually have like the small seeds They have sunflower seeds and a few other seeds in that mixture. So it all depends on who you want to call in and, you know, what your, I guess, what your main goal is.
All right. We have another question, and that is what your thought is about bird feeders that have cameras in them. Is there any sort of electrical hum potentially that could be scaring away birds?
What was that question again?
For any bird feeders that might have a built-in camera, is there any downside to that? Like, is there an electrical hum that might scare the birds away?
I'm not as familiar because I don't know enough about that. So that's a good question. I'd be happy to do a little research, a little digging, if whoever asked that question would like to give me their email.
Sure, we can definitely check on that. I know we are here at the end of our time, so I see some people dropping off here, but I want to say thank you everyone for joining us. If you have some questions and you do want to stick around, please feel free. We're a smaller group now, so if you just want to unmute yourself, you are welcome to. So we'll see if we have any last questions here. Oh, we have a question from Jill, maybe? Oh,
Jill saying
just waving to say hi.
hi. Hi, Jill.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Maggie. That was very comprehensive. I know that I learn something every time that I hear from any of the educators that come onto this series. So thank you, everyone. Be on the lookout for more. We'll probably take a little break as we do move into our Eagle Fest extended festival this year. So thank you all for joining us again, and we hope to see you soon.